As for now, I'd like to take the time to wish all of you an enjoyable Christmas season and a new year full of joy. Of course, some of you might not experience that joy, as some of you may get misfortune this year, but well, that is officially the last time I'm ever parodying a George Carlin script. Anyways, welcome to my 2024 New Year's special, and once again, we have had a pretty bad year. What is new, to be honest? Though you could argue that some people had it way worse than others over this year, especially for people in the YouTube community, with Mr. Beast probably getting the worst of it. As in July, his best friend Ava Chris Tyson had grooming and even CP allegations, which I only wish this time I was referring to Canadian Pacific, but I already explained that I don't refer to the Canadian Pacific as CP, so I'm not referring to the Canadian Pacific. But anyways, Tyson also got CP allegations at him. He's also allegedly not transgendered, according to one of Tyson's siblings, and as just mentioned, may not actually be transgendered. And since Tyson was Mr. Beast's best friend, it would become a nightmare for Mr. Beast. And to add insult to injury for Mr. Beast, a former employee from Mr. Beast posted a video about a ton of allegations that Mr. Beast did, such as abuses, illegal lotteries, etc. But I don't have so much memory about it. I didn't watch the thing too many times. As a bit of an update, Mr. Beast was also allegedly charged for having CP on his phone just like Chris Tyson. Again, I only wish I was talking about Canadian Pacific. However, that flew under a lot of people's radars. But that's allegedly, because I have not gotten a lot of proof of it so far. So if you weren't already a rail fan who hated Mr. Beast because Boohoo, a train that is as common as a GIFO, got destroyed, and then later on a very uncommon train was used but repaired, causing a ton of people to assume the worst, which, seriously? Aren't you overreacting a bit? Railroad museums don't just get a letter from someone saying that they want to do stunts or action with the train they have and say, "Very well, here you go!" The museum gives serious oversight, and even if a script called for a wreck, they don't automatically let someone wreck something precious. Did you honestly think they wrecked the real SP-4449 for Tough Guys? Did you honestly think they drove the real Sierra Railway number 3 off a bridge? But anyways, if you weren't a rail fan who already hated Mr. Beast because of those two events, you did now. The internet turned on Mr. Beast like the Japanese internet turned on Hiya Masaya in 2023, and Mr. Beast's reputation started nosediving harder than Alaska Airlines Flight 26, no. You know what? Cut that out. That's not funny. And the crash is honestly just sad. Which continued until the internet started turning on Dogpack 404, to which I don't even know jack at this point, but at least the commentary channels are gonna be able to pay rent for at least the next 9 months. Fortunately, 2024 wasn't all bad, just most of it. In terms of good things, on the rail side anyways, we saw Phase 7 Genesis units, the addition of more CSX's Heritage units, more Phase 7 Genesis units, CP Rail 2816's longest run to date, as well as reintroducing mainline steam to a country for the first time since the 1960s, more Phase 7 Genesis units, the return of some steam locomotives, more Phase 7 Genesis units, and the expected return of New York Central 3001 and C&O 614. Did I mention Phase 7 Genesis unit? There were also plenty of other things that happened outside of the railroad aspect of this year, but I do not exactly have the time to research it all and figure out which is which and etc. But there was still plenty of good things during 2024 that wasn't just rail. As for me, I'd like to reflect on what I have done this year and what I hope to do in the upcoming year 2025. In this video, I will share you what I have seen and done this year, including all the projects that I have done, especially the Remade Europe videos, and take a look at the places that I have went to, especially Canada, the Durango and Silverton, and Cancun. Now then, to introduce this video, first off, let me talk about a project that I had wanted to do since 2021 or 2022 at least. My year videos were originally uploaded back in 2019. Back then, though, I was using only a phone app to stitch a lot of these videos together with very little details included. This app was called Video Shop, and while it was good for making very basic videos, it wasn't exactly good for a lot of bigger stuff. Unless you paid, to which I wasn't willing to. 5 years later with Wondershare, I have been able to include a lot more, mainly narration and photos on the video, and especially facts, including the fact that the leg from Denver to Frankfurt was my first flight on the 747, which is now a dying breed in aviation, especially since the 747 had now long been discontinued. Also in Frankfurt, I included the German bedtime stories part because, yes, minus the Das Hudenverstumelung, those are legit bedtime stories by Germans, which makes me question how German kids even go to bed. With us landing in Frankfurt, we're in Germany, aka the land of some of the most batshit creepy bedtime stories known to mankind, such as Der Freischütz, Der Struwwelpeter, Der Weise Frau, and most terrifyingly of all, Das Hudenverstumelung. I, though, for the most part, mentioned German bedtime stories because throughout this whole year series, whenever I brought Germany or Austria up, I wanted to steer well clear away from Nazis because I felt like that would have been incredibly unoriginal whenever the first thing somebody thought of when it came to Germany came to mind. But anyways, I wanted to share this MD-11 part because when I made the trip, seeing McDonnell Douglas aircraft still in active service to me was like the railroad equivalent of seeing an Alco locomotive still in regular service. So I wanted to get them before they were officially history, which would ultimately come true 2 years later, since now Lufthansa Cargo has retired all their MD-11s from active service. Part of the reason I'd remake these videos from Europe was because of the trams that were used along the systems in Europe, especially Prague. In Prague especially, you'd see new trams that were low floor and especially sleek, and on the other hand, you'd still see trams that were still kicking since the days of communist Czechoslovakia. And although I am not a fan of communism whatsoever, any comments of me you'd see of me actually supporting communism are from 2019. I'm over that phase now. Riding these old trams that were from the days of Czechoslovakia under communism was still quite a joy to experience, and contrasting very old to very new in Prague was especially a cool thing to experience. Though we weren't able to ride on the trams that were in between very old and very new, so I was not able to add a third compare and contrast. Of course, there were other things to experience in Prague, like the music. And the boat ride, although I mostly took video of it because there were still trams around in the area, and for the most part you have peaceful Danube, despite the fact that this was not the Danube, this was the Vltava, assuming I am not pronouncing that correctly, which I'm definitely not.
Double-deck trams. Those double-deck trams are from the old days.
Which was still fun, even though I didn't record that much of it. I'd say the coolest part of the Prague part of the Europe trip was when we experienced the Prague Castle. This was also something I originally omitted from the original Europe videos, and I decided that now that I was remaking this was something that I should really put in, especially because of how amazing these relics of Prague's past were. Honestly, looking back, knowing the fact that Prague escaped a lot of the collateral damage brought on by World War II is, to understate it, a miracle. Not a lot of cities got away with that little damage, even though there was a brief offensive in Prague at the end of the war in Europe. And the fact that Prague was still able to keep a lot of its tram network, when a lot of the tram networks in Western Europe anyways, disappeared, is also a miracle, at least for public transportation enthusiasts like me. Heading away from trams for now and turning to intercity trains, I had known for a bit that the Eurosprinter, which led the Railjet, was inspiration for the ACS-64 back in America, so seeing the Railjet was honestly kinda like meeting someone's dad. In addition, a lot of the equipment around the Prague station, both with the Railjet and outside the Railjet, has been inspiration for equipment that is now in America, especially the Viaggio Comforts, which are now inspiration for Ventures, and the Vectrons, which are partial inspiration for the family of Chargers. Before this trip, I had the impression that a majority of trains in the eastern part of Europe were pretty outdated, but that isn't entirely the case, fortunately. Although this trip along the Railjet was pretty fun, one thing I didn't actually like about it was the fact that somebody was playing music in the background at one point, and it was also copyrighted, and I don't know if he had his headphones out, but it felt rude.
Somebody's playing Try Everything. No, wait, he's not. Darn! I played that song. To be honest with you. Oh wait, now it's playing it again. Please don't copy strike me, Shakira, if I upload this to YouTube. Because I'm not really intending on focusing this video on your song.
I just, you don't have to. It's right in the top.
And I actually had to cover it up with Mario Kart Wii music.
Somebody's playing try everything. Oh wait. Darn. Song. Oh wait, now it's playing it again. Please don't copy strike me, Shakira, if I upload this to YouTube.
And in addition, another detail that I wanted to include that I omitted from the previous Europe videos, partly because I didn't know it at the time, was that all these railjet trains were owned by OBB, and some of them are just leased out to CD. I partially learned this through a comment on one of my original Europe videos. So the fact that I was on a train set that was actually pretty rare was something that I honestly kind of wish I knew. Thankfully, I now know. Moving into Austria and Vienna, a lot of the footage that was from just the first partial day in Vienna was omitted from the initial Europe videos, mainly because Video Shop had some sort of 60-minute rule, probably unless you paid, and there was quite a bit left out, which I would include in part 2. And in addition, one huge convenience with the trams anyways was that we were right next to a U-Bahn and Straßenbahn interchange. Though, one thing that I had also wanted to include was my unfortunate encounter with a Karen. Ultimately, I was going to kinda exaggerate it a bit, but I realized that that would probably not be very good to put on the internet, and my dad overheard me voice acting it, and he didn't like it, and so I decided to change it up a bit. I also did censor the woman's face just for privacy concerns.
So you filmed it, huh? Are you filming?
Yeah.
You can't film people on the street just like that. I mean, what you're doing, you're filming for the last 15 minutes. I watched you.
No.
You can't really do that.
No, I was only filming for like 7 minutes.
We are under observation anyway already, so.
But, looking back, I'm sure Dad did see that and knew something was up. After a bit, Dad would intervene, and although Dad's intervention would support me, it wouldn't exactly make the woman happy. But we would be able to leave without further repercussions, let alone the woman calling the police on us. Yes, she did threaten that. I never imagined that I would encounter a Karen in Vienna. And when I originally uploaded the Europe videos, I edited a lot of those sections with that woman out of the videos, just because I didn't have very good editing skills, let alone good editing software at the time. But, moving on. The metros in Vienna were also something that fascinated me. Especially the U-types where you actually had to pull a handle on the doors to open it, rather than the doors opening on their own, which is common on the other U-Bahn stock. But not only that, one of the U-Bahn lines, the U6, was actually originally a Stadtbahn line from the original Vienna S-Bahn. And there is still a Vienna S-Bahn, but it's a different Vienna S-Bahn from the Stadtbahn, and it's of the Schnellbahn, or Rapid Railway, not Stadtbahn. Hence the reason that the U6 has overhead catenary rather than third rail like the other U-Bahn lines. And of course, there was going to the Schönbrunn Palace 2 times. which was a really neat treat, especially because the first time we went to a bit of a concert with music. Man, Vienna is like an opera and music capital. And for the second time, looking around the palace, which was really beautiful. I kind of negated that from the original Europe videos, although I did put it at the end of one of the videos from Vienna. And I only did this because I thought it would be funny for some reason. I don't know what was going through my head at the time, but I was 14. Overall, I think the second part of my Remade Europe videos was probably my favorite to do, especially with all the trams and riding metros, and especially visiting a former Habsburg palace. Though eventually we'd have to leave Vienna for our next and last stop, Budapest. But for the intro for that third part video, I said this because I thought it would be a bit creative. Last time on half these buildings will get me in trouble with copyright infringement because that's a thing apparently. There's inevitably that one, yes it's a thing, and I kind of wanted to introduce that because I thought that would be a bit funny. But anyways, all the stuff from Vienna to Budapest was almost completely omitted from the original Europe videos. When they were initially made back in 2019, 2020, yeah. And that's because I didn't even do the Vienna to Budapest parts for my initial Europe videos. I just went straight from day one of Vienna all the way to us leaving Europe via airplane. Though honestly, there wasn't that much to talk about during the Budapest segment. There were a couple of cool train sets that we passed along the way to Budapest from Vienna. There was also a displayed steam engine at one point. And at Budapest we did go on a Ferris wheel and see a lot of other cool things around Budapest as well. But overall, I think by this point I wasn't exactly well invested in making part 3 look very good, and honestly I feel like I kinda rushed through it. By that point I was coming out of a bit of a break from making videos because by that point I had completed a bunch of other projects beforehand and was kinda like rushing through them before I would go to Cancun and celebrate my birthday. Though I still decided to include whatever I could to the best of my abilities, even despite the fact that I was coming out of a break from a bit of burnout over the summer. I am not exactly proud of the third part of the Europe videos, but at the same time, don't exactly hate this part either. After all, I still believe that I captured whatever cool things I could, and I also believe that I had managed to capture quite a nice view of Budapest at night at the end, which is probably my favorite part of this segment anyways. And as two more notable things, I especially included this segment of when we were flying towards Newark Airport and over the Portal Bridge because I want to share what it was like then compared to now that the Portal Bridge is now more than half finished. And also this part I really wanted to include because of the fact that the MD-10s, aka DC-10s, were about to retire soon. And at least when I was making the trip, and now are already retired. Oh yeah, speaking of airplanes.
This video is a bit of a continuation of my last one, why planes don't fly faster.
This was the second major thing that I had from my Arizona spring break trip, apart from the Sunset Limited ride, that I had recorded that I didn't get to until early in 2024. It would also be the last project where I had to use this damn hard drive that was the cause for at least 90% of my Wondershare Filmora pain during 2023, and to some extent this year, apart from the nationalization video, but that's something for a different video. I would get my relatives to take me here because there were a lot of airplanes at the Pima Air and Space Museum that I wanted to see, especially since a lot of them have achieved ALCO status at this point and are hardly seen in regular service, if at all, minus the 787. That, though, is me talking about the actual commercial airplanes and not the actual fighter jets or other military aircraft. Though that was primarily because I was more interested in the airplanes that were in commercial service and not military service, but it was still amazing to see a lot of the airplanes that were in military service. Of course, seeing airplanes that look like they'd be in civilian service and not military service, but were actually military variants of their civilian selves, was also amazing, especially the C-9 Skytrain and this US Air Force 707. C-137 Stratoliner, please don't kill me, Boeing nerds. Also, one of my uncles was visiting when I was making this, so I allowed him to say this right here.
An AC-130 passes overhead. Hopefully no Call of
That's an
Duty players are
AC-130?
getting PTSD attacks.
Take a wild guess as to what I was making my uncle refer to. This small part here was partial inspiration from a 7 Idea Productions video. Hopefully some of you know what the SP and 747SP stands for. And no, it's not short for this. 1053!
Thank you, Stacy.
There's this part because I know that I am feeling old knowing that a 777 has been preserved now. I really think that I'm getting too old for this horse. Though, one of the biggest differences in this video was this part talking about the DC-10. As we all know, the DC-10 was fortunately a beloved airplane that was absolutely not despised of by the general public because of 2 or 3 high-profile accidents early on in its life, of which only one of them was because of the manufacturer, with the other one because of maintenance, of which the last one the general public totally understood and didn't trust American Airlines again, which in turn didn't make people see the DC-10 as a literal Jack the Ripper disguised as a series of airplanes, and to which the public did not make the D part in its name stand for death when it stood for Douglas, except I'm just kidding! Because of that, I decided to partially poke fun at a lot of those people with a bit of ridiculing their logic and poking fun at their name creations. Douglas Thomas character? Douglas Aircraft Corporation became Death, insert whatever starts with the C here. After this though, it was originally going to be different. I'll let this speak for itself, though do mind the fact that there's nothing in the background because I was doing this with a really bad hard drive. And as a side note, pretend this freeze frame is in place of where all the dark stuff is supposed to be, please. And the DC part in DC-10, which stood for Douglas Thomas character, Douglas Aircraft Corporation became Death, insert whatever starts with the C here. Primarily among aviation fans, people who know little about the airplane, and... Ew! And yeah, no other airplane has ever crashed in existence, has ever crashed before. No other airplane has ever had any ground fatalities. No other airplane has ever crashed. It's just a DC-10! Also, I hate to be the bearer of bad news to any Concorde fans out there, but even without Air France Flight 4590, the Concorde most likely would have been retired anyways. There were all sorts of factors going against the plane, even when it was ungrounded, especially September 11th fuel, maintenance, etc. So the Concorde would have been retired even if there wasn't a DC-10 in existence. But if people don't and now look at this, and I'd like for you to draw your own conclusions on which is better. And the DC part in DC-10, which stood for Douglas Thomas character, Douglas Aircraft Corporation became Death, insert whatever starts with the C here. It didn't help that somebody at Continental Airlines decided it was a good idea to install a third-party strip on a DC-10. And now a lot of the Concorde fandom is on the same brainwaves as people who think that Metra is the sole reason the 5629 was scrapped. Basically, the life of the 10 after 1979 was about the same as Collinsn't.
化け物が来るんじゃねえよ。違う。こっち見た。心を読まれるぞ。だから親に捨てられるんだよ。
And as a side note, one thing I wanted to include but didn't include was the fact that before I found out that the DC part stood for Douglas Corporation, I thought it stood for Direct Current. Take a wild guess why I thought that. Oh yeah, speaking of Via Rail...
A wonderful view with so much to share.
Although I've been to Canada, especially the Quebec City, Windsor area before back in 2016, I wanted to go again and include another city, Ottawa. I also want to go there because Via Rail will eventually retire their older Button LRV fleet in the future in favor of the Venture/Charger sets, despite CN imposing another stupid 32-axle limit on the Siemens sets, which I find stupid. And also to Via, look at Amtrak. We have a shunt enhancing device. Install those on your trains. For the beginning, I made this line as a reference to a section of a Yakuza 0 review. Yup, they made Canada from Rocky Mountain Railroad into a real place. Your eyes are not deceiving you. Also, this part had to be redone, especially the music and narration, but the old version is still available on my YouTube. In this 3-part video series, you'll see, including but not limited to, preserved rolling stock from the Canadian National and Canadian Pacific, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific trains, a ride on Via Rail, twice, both in business class, and the public transit in Toronto and Ottawa, among other things. Without further ado, let us take a journey to Canada! I also did this unapologetically because South Park. Hey Dad, what did the Spanish priest say to the Iranian gynecologist? Here at Great Grimsby, I knew that the Maple Leaf being operated by Via in this part was going to have Amtrak equipment, but I kept that hidden from Dad and his friend until the train came past. And honestly, I acted that way too. Wait a minute, is that an Amtrak train? That is right everybody, America's railroad just so happens to serve a little bit of Canada. In addition, I would put a lot of interesting and cool facts about some areas we would pass by while on the trains, but I also felt that the recognition of some not-so-fun facts was also important too. Hence why I would talk about the 2012 Burlington derailment in Part 1. This location here is unfortunately the location of a tragic Via Rail accident that took place in 2012. A Via Rail crew misunderstood a signal and went across a 15-mile-per-hour switch at 67 miles per hour. As well as this part relating to a 2013 bus versus train crash in Ottawa in Part 2. Thankfully, a double-decker bus didn't crash into us this time. Jokes aside, that unfortunately did happen at that very crossing we passed by. Should I? But the interesting and fun facts are still nice to talk about. The Lakeshore West Line was one of the first GO Transit lines to be inaugurated when GO Transit was created on May 23rd, 1967. Yes, GO Transit is older than Amtrak.
Around there.
And this part would be inspired by a comment from that very video that I would mention. Also, just to briefly mention this, to tell the difference between a railroad and a railway, watch Amtrak Guy 365's video about it. So that way you won't have to be shot if you ever say Union Pacific Railway or Canadian Pacific Railroad. I'm about to get shot, am I? Courtesy of the Winnipeg Railfan himself, and now I am scheduled to report to my execution by firing squad by every Canadian Railfan. Goodbye, and see ya in that, well, weird afterlife school place from Angel Beats. Yes, this one via train did scare me.
Whoa!
And I think I gave Dad a bit of a chuckle. Here's the unedited version.
Whoa!
And yes, I know they call them streetcars here in North America, but they call them trams elsewhere, so I knew I had to put Toby's theme here. Do you see something in red? That's a train on Toronto's streetcar system. The Toronto streetcar system is one of the few original streetcar systems still remaining in North America, and today the streetcars that are used for the Toronto streetcar network are the Flexity Outlook type. The streetcars once used the iconic Canadian light rail vehicle car, but they got retired in 2019 after they were replaced by the Flexity Outlooks. In addition, one thing I did not know about the scheme put on some of Via Rail's P42s and F40PHs was that a lot of Canadian rail fans absolutely hate the scheme. In fact, do you know what nickname they give them? Silver Dildos. Yes, really. And even though I wasn't really demanding it or anything, Dad still went out of the way to have us both stay in a hotel that overlooked the tracks, and to an extent, Toronto City Airport as well as Roundhouse Park. So if you want an explanation to why I was able to get footage of trains from above the Union Station tracks, thank my dad. Of course, I wouldn't stay there forever, I would go to the Roundhouse Park. And an interesting note is that although there is all this rolling stock here in Roundhouse Park, I also learned from one of my local Canadian rail experts is that the museum owns an LRC locomotive and plans to get an F59 at some point when they're retired. Unfortunately, they would exceed weight capacity on a parking garage below it, so they can't display the LRC right now. First time, Canadians. And the Jeep you're seeing on screen is actually the Jeep where I would record the opening shot for the beginning of the video. What is up, everybody? My name is Harrison, and right now, we're here in Canada. Here are some alternate takes and outtakes. You can decide for yourself which ones were better than the others. What is up, everybody? It's Harrison here, and today we are in Toronto, Canada, so essentially, we're in Canada. What's up, everybody? Harrison here, and today we are in Toronto, Canada. What is up, everybody? My name is Harrison, and right now we are in Toronto, Canada. So essentially, we're in Canada. Also, this is an old CN locomotive. What is up, everybody? Dang it. Okay, this is getting a bit ridiculous because I'm showing selfies of myself now. For me, I believe that for anyone who's a fan of steam locomotives, seeing a locomotive sitting on display and not active in any way, whether it was in good care or not, is a sad sight. And while I am personally just happy that a steam locomotive is on display, I also want to convey a bit of thought that 6213 is probably a bit sad not being able to run with the narration and the theme of Mio Nishizono. That there is CN 6213. It's a 484 Northern type that was built in 1942 by the Montreal Locomotive Works as part of CN's fleet of Confederations until retirement in 1959. But she wasn't scrapped, and instead was donated to the city of Toronto and stayed on static display at the location of what was once new Fort York, before being placed in Roundhouse Park. Fortunately, despite being a park engine, the museum has kept really good care of 6213, and has spent the time and money to keep her in good-looking order. However, to some steam locomotive enthusiasts, it does look as if she's stranded inside a cage almost. However, it may be possible that CN 6213 could have an excursion career in the future, albeit the chance is small. The 6213 went through a refit at CNR Stratford shops before retirement, and according to the Wikipedia article for 6213, is therefore an ideal candidate for restoration to live steam at some point in the future. And the society that takes care of her, the TLPS, continues to explore options for potentially firing her up sometime in the future. While that may be glad news for some to hear, as of now it's only potential, and we're not sure what could happen, but only time will tell. For now though, 6213 remains where she is.
These locomotives are blocked off from the public. To be honest, I don't really blame them. These locomotives are rare. A lot of people probably see value in some of the parts.
I have played the Little Busters VN, and the theme just sounds like something that represents a sad moment with the potential for it to not be so sad. But until then, it'll remain sad, hence the placement of the narration with the theme. I felt that it would be something that fitted well. Again, I am happy it's preserved, and better yet, looking good, but I do recognize for some, especially those who do work on functioning preserved steam locomotives, it's not the same as it being active. Also, I think I may have invoked the feelings of every person who hates CSX's heritage units in this scene. Is CN 9159. Except, somebody decided to only preserve the cab! What the hell? For the end, there's one P42DC you see, still in the older VIA livery that I do believe is 915. I thought I saw either 916 or 915, and after doing a Google search of 916, ruled it out because it had the newer livery. Unless that P42 was 917, I'm convinced that I saw 915. And this series is one of the few that have exclusive outros because, for this one, I think I watch a bit too much Monty Python.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I sleep all night, I work all day.
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and he works all day.
Going into part 2, the bug cars were something that just amazed me, considering how long they've been in service for. Because obviously, bud don't break. But because of how hard it is now for VIA to maintain these bud cars, I did find it fun to insert this bit to describe just how painful it probably is for VIA to operate cars that existed more than 23 years before it went into operation. While these cars are an amazing sight to behold for rail fans, and I'll admit I found it amazing that they have lasted this long, they're a bit of a nightmare for VIA Rail considering the cost of spare parts and maintenance with the bud cars. In fact, these club cars date back to when steam locomotives were still in common use. But I would find these bud cars fun to ride on, even if many people would consider the trains that VIA Rail operates that use these bud cars as rolling museums. Also, this part is where I cranked up my use of OSTs I know are copyrighted, and just seeing how long I'd get away with any of them. Somehow these tracks at the beginning weren't copyrighted.
Searchlights.
But these two tracks were...
That one had a mechanical bell.
So yeah, I am a bit surprised on that level. Another thing I'd like to note here is that this was the last trip where I was only using a single battery for my DSLR camera. On trips like this and prior, you'd notice differentiating levels of video quality, and that's because I was using both my DSLR and my phone. I'd use my phone whenever I'd have my battery for the DSLR to charge. I did order 2 batteries for my DSLR to act as spares, but they did not arrive in time for this trip. So many times I would see that my camera has 1 out of 3 bars, and I'd just keep on praying by that point. In this part where I would mention the CN100 unit, I did at one point think of mentioning CSX's heritage units along the lines of something like, if people think CSX's heritage units were lazy, I dare you to defend this, or something like that. I decided to mention CN's heritage units instead, although it was partially to show just how much I don't like CN. Fortunately though, the next year to celebrate 25 years of CN's privatization, CN made several heritage units, so at least CN made another effort elsewhere. I guess. Sorry, I'm just not a big fan of CN. Not after what they're doing to Amtrak. For this part here, I used the actual Canadian Pacific logo that was in place during the 1950s. There was also a CP Rail station that CP Rail used after acquiring the Kingston and Pembroke Railway, but CP Rail went bye-bye from Kingston in the 50s and the tracks were torn up, but at least that station remains. As a side note about this part right here, however, that isn't to say that there are no K5LAs on Via Rail. After asking another one of my local Canadian railway experts, I heard that Via Rail and EXO do double horns, and you would see 2 K5CAs sometimes, but only if the original horn broke. You'd still have some units with K5CAs and the original horn, like here. After getting off the train and seeing the front engine, and the front engine of another train, when we got to the O train, I said this: if you have come back from the previous 2 parts, welcome back. And if you're viewing this for the first time, that's okay. You're just gonna be more confused than Justin Trudeau finding out that a carbon tax wouldn't really work if you're just gonna give the tax money back to the people. This joke at the beginning was based on something I heard about the Canadian carbon tax, that for some reason when the taxes get collected, they're just sent back to you or another person in Canada. They're not used for building a nuclear plant or for decarbonizing a heavily polluting industry, and most certainly not for high-speed rail, basically making it pointless. Something I'd like to note here was that my dad actually asked if I wanted to go to the War Museum or the Science and Tech Museum first, and I decided to opt for the former, partially because I saw it as closer to the hotel we were staying in, and for some reason I thought it was open until later. And because I am a history major at my college, learning how another country saw a war occur, especially those when America and Canada still had some bad blood between them, on the Canadian side anyways, was something I wanted to learn about. Yet, a lot of the things post-World War I that I saw in the museum that Canadians experienced were similar to what Americans experienced in War II. Which is honestly why I have the belief that almost anything America did, Canada did something similar. With the Japanese-Canadian part especially reinforcing this. Though this museum had a lot of experience that you probably wouldn't know of if you visited an American war museum. Though one thing I didn't know about prior to this was before Operation Overlord, there were the Dieppe landings, an attempt by the Americans, British, and Canadians to make a Western Front, which ended in disaster. And I don't think I heard that from a textbook or from a lot of history videos about World War II. Not oversimplified, and I don't think Armchair Historian has made a video on them either. Yet, through the whole experience, I think the coolest part was the collection of military vehicles. That wasn't even a fraction of what they had. Honestly, I wish we had more time. In the video recorded here, I did make a bit of an error and thought this flame was named the Eternal Flame, but it was actually named the Centennial Flame. I would mute that part so that I didn't sound stupid. However, apart from the War Museum, there's another place in Ottawa that I really wanted to go to. Speaking of that place, it was the Canada Science and Technology Museum. Though remember the fact that I had a single battery for my DSLR camera for this trip, as well as trips prior, I thought I had that battery with me. I didn't! And this bit was inspired by two videos. Over there are some steam engines. We'll get back to them in a bit. There were also these TVs here which I think were from the... Okay, I lied to you. We're actually doing that now. Low tier god now lightning meme goes into the video here.
We will get back to that shit, so you can do a variety of builds and experiment with your... Okay, I lied to you, we're actually doing this now. I haven't even gotten to the horde of angry chainsaws yet. Chainsaw Man reference goes in the video here. And these steam locomotives at this museum was a lot of the reason why I wanted to come to Canada again and take a bit of a detour to the capital. Though, if I'm being honest, I wanted to see 3100 the most. After this short rest bit here and take a wild guess what that 2816 part was referring to, it would transition into an Octoling takeover bit, which was mainly inspired by various Splatoon, SFMs, and Gmod videos that I have seen over the years. I, though, can't animate, so this was done in makeup for a lack of a skill that I have. Also, Harrison Gaming. What the? And this part is also Maxor inspiration. After 8 hours of the real estate quest, I probably had a PTSD attack.
When we got back to the station, I was given the option to upgrade the economy class tickets I got to business class. Business class is basically first class with extra steps at this point. And I was conflicted, but I thought that maybe we would go on a different train set than the previous time, and so I would eventually decide to go with the upgrading. And I was right. The train we would board was one of Via Rail's Siemens sets, and these sets had cars and seats that were pretty comfortable and felt good, unlike the Midwest Ventures. And I genuinely think they're the closest I'll get to riding Brightline until I actually ride Brightline. And I kinda believe that when Via Rail was consulting Siemens, they went, "Oh, about those new trains, we want the locomotives and cab cars to look like the Brightline ones, eh?" And Siemens went, "Ah yes, we can do that." Though the ride to Montreal was pretty fun, especially the fact that I was able to drink wine aboard the train and the US government couldn't stop me. Hence this. Since we weren't in America, I was at the legal drinking age in Canada, and at this point, the feds in America could not stop me from exercising my new right and liberty to drink alcohol under 21. But what was also fun was what was at Montreal, including some rare stuff and EXO, especially the Illinois Central Unit and the Grunk Caboose, as well as another EXO F-59, as well as ReZero character named Transit System. We passed some Renaissance cars, though to be honest, that is a lot of what I would see in Montreal. I wanted to go on the metro, but I didn't. But I did at one point see a CN Canadian cab, so I was taking my first ride on an A220 out of Montreal. And while my initial ideas for what I wanted to do during spring break turned into something else, it was still fun, and I'd do that something else later. Speaking of which... This was my first trip west of Denver on the California Zephyr since 2018, my first trip west of Glenwood Springs since 2016, and my first ever trip to see the Durango and Silverton. The Durango and Silverton I especially want to do since I was a child, after seeing all those videos of the Durango and Silverton on VHS, DVD, and YouTube. This was also the first trip in a while where I would go with my mom rather than my dad. And in addition, this is something where I would share a lot of the basic knowledge about this route, but also dive somewhat deeper in some areas. For one, I would talk about the Big Ten Curve, but I would get the wrong information about why it was named Big Ten Curve, but not the reasons the hoppers welded on the spur exist. And this part here was honestly a bit of an excuse for me to look for Sin's videos on YouTube. And if a train doesn't know about a rock slide that could be dangerous to it, well, let's just say that there are way more things that could go wrong then than a Sin's video of any kind of media. And oftentimes during the trip, there were curve shots since this line is so curvy that these shots are pretty much common to make, which I would consistently do because the line goes through mountains. And even though there are not that many freight trains on the line these days, I would still get quite a few freight trains. Of course, it wasn't all about the freight trains, as there was plenty of scenery to go past, and there was especially the dive into the Moffat Tunnel and out of the Moffat Tunnel. Of course, not without getting away from God's Light at Winter Park. Though a lot of times, like through canyons and even along flatlands, I would get shots of the train from the rear, with all the scenery obviously. And oftentimes this series would consistently use of music that I would consider Western-like, especially this track that's playing in the background here. This shot here was also my first shot of the Rocky Mountaineer, but since it was so far away, it wasn't a really good shot. But I would get my true Rocky Mountaineer shot later on in June, but I'll get to that in a bit. In this bit here with the description of how Gore Canyon was attempted to be a stop by Harriman to stop the Moffat route from being finished, the drawing I used was gonna be in part 2 of the Europe videos, but then I decided against it, and recycled that to the first Rocky Mountain Rail Journey video. When the route through Gore Canyon was about to be built in the 1900s, a competitor was playing dirty. Edward Harriman, who had control of the Union Pacific, Southern Pacific, and some others, threw up a shell company through Gore Canyon to block the line's construction. The Moffett route seemed screwed, except Theodore Roosevelt was in the area. Roosevelt blocked the proposal of the dam through Gore Canyon, and Moffett won one victory, but the DNW&P would never be finished. Moffett died before he could see this route succeed, and ironically, this route would come under ownership of the Southern Pacific and ultimately the Union Pacific, which were both owned by Harriman, who was trying to stop this route from not being built. And of course, we got mooned along the way, by the way. But they're censored by troll faces because I don't think YouTube would allow that on here. And this reference to History in the Dark's depiction of Perlman is also a Maxor reference. And it wouldn't be until Alfred E. Perlman came to the Rio Grande that the Rio Grande would finally become financially stable. Though, unlike what History in the Dark says, Perlman wasn't a literal chainsaw man thinking he was coming after the steam devil, while constantly screaming, "I want that steam engine!" like a child begging his parents or grandparents to purchase a model steam engine.
Wait a second. I think I recognize that music. It's Chainsaw Man. Man thinks he's coming after the shower devil.
After passing the eastbound Zephyr, there was a bald eagle that I would take a photo of. And of course, with the bald eagle, well, I think you know why I did this.
What the fuck is a kilometer?
Sucks that the actual eagle sound effect is from the red-tailed hawk, though. But it was originally only gonna include just the OG text, but my brother suggested that I add the "I only believe in freedom units" part, and I did. And to anyone wondering about that scene on the bottom right, it's from the second to last episode of Angel Beats. Hold on a sec! No way! That's the I Love Toy Trains crash sound effect! Though some of the music in here is often a lot louder than others, mainly to protect from conversations we had, or conversations that my mom had with others. Here, I showed footage of an older video from when Tennessee Pass was still in operation, with permission of course, to show what the pass was like, and why even though it was awesome for rail fans, it was Spain without the S for the operators. Even though it could come back, though, for passengers, not freight. And after going through Glenwood Canyon, I would talk about the Aspen branch, just because its demise is sad, especially for a line that could have had potential for any passenger service in the valley. But that's just me. Nowadays especially complain about rails trails, and especially the reference to Fishers, Indiana, because that one pains me the most, although it's probably nostalgia bias from Steam in the summer. But the RFTA just rejected that, and now all but a few sections of track in Glenwood Springs has been turned into a rail trail. Because why have a tourist line or a commuter rail to alleviate traffic from Highway 82 when you can walk? Right? Right? Because of the short-sighted decision, it is now believed that the branch probably will never have trains on it again. Sure, the possibility is there, but it's incredibly low, if not absolute zero. Sadly, things like what happened to the Aspen branch are still happening in all sorts of areas across America. Fishers, Indiana. And here was when I would start using music from a gacha game a lot more frequently. I would start using music from Blue Archive.
about when we drop validation. Like a new married couple.
Yeah.
Or something. But like a 20-year-old doesn't always know. I mean, it was like 6 kids. It was like huge. And they wanted miracle. Yeah.
A lot of music was picked in areas that I thought was most appropriate, especially when we were traveling through the Beck Canyon. And in my opinion, Constant Moderato just sounded so appropriate for an arrival, especially at Grand Junction.
$26.92. 527.
Before I go to the DNS, one thing in particular that I'd like to note is that I honestly was considering inserting an edit where older Steam Age rail fans who were around during the dieselization days would look like they're getting flashbacks from the steam locomotives and deadlines with the Grand Junction deadline. That is in particular why this line after we passed the deadline was said. It's like I can hear the remaining rail fans who were still alive during the dieselization days receiving a PTSD attack from seeing that deadline. I would just leave it as that and then just moved on. And now we come to the Durango and Silverton, of which the first round trip is by far my longest video on my channel so far. And I don't know why, but I just had a frantic reason and desire to release the videos of the Durango and Silverton on my birthday. And you can tell just from the beginning of the first video. For now, let's visit the DNS, and better yet, today is my birthday! Though the immediate biggest surprise from when I was on this trip was when I saw DNS 476 with Illinois Central lettering on its side. By sheer coincidence, I booked a trip to the DNS when there was filming going on the railroad. Though when I shared this with my audience, they were not happy, shall I say? Though again, I highly recommend Chris Eden Green's Gauge the Issue video on things like this. Because if the Durango and Silverton was what the filmmakers got, well, the Durango and Silverton was what the filmmakers were gonna use. The filming was for Horizon, an American Saga, a series of Western films, I believe part 2, and I even got close to the guy who'd organized it all, Kevin Costner, an actor and director. He has acted in films like Hidden Figures.
There you have it. No more colored restrooms. No more white restrooms. Just plain old toilets. Go wherever you damn well please. Preferably closer to your desk.
And even directed and acted in other films like Horizon and The Highwaymen, a film about the men who take out two of America's most notorious criminals, Bonnie and Clyde.
Cold automatic pistol, 1917 Smith right behind it. You don't want to see that BAR, 30-06. The out-3 Springfield with the grass up top there.
And he's actually a pretty chill guy, and I wish him success on the rest of the Horizon series. As for riding the trains, I had originally planned 2 round trips for Mom and I to ride on. The first one we'd do the whole thing, and the conductor, Maria, was a fun person to ride with. And if you couldn't tell, I was just excited to ride the Durango and Silverton. A dream come true. And yes, I'm a sucker for steel bells, sue me. And of course there was all sorts of scenery along the DNS, especially the High Line, which although has likely been photographed and recorded to hell and back, I still recorded and photographed anyways because I wanted my own memory of riding the DNS. Up until then, I'd only seen the High Line in videos and pictures, and by then I was there for real. Of course, there's also a lot of lore about the line, but I think Maria and the other conductors were a better expert at explaining all of that than I would have been. Not only that, but they'd show things like accidents that had occurred on the line, as well as when they wrecked 2 locomotives for the film Denver and Rio Grande, where someone blew the explosives half a second too early. I hope someone got fired for that. But we'd still make it to Silverton and get some sightings of old sections of the line, especially at this bridge and the old trestle just south of Silverton, where it was officially replaced weeks before I got there, hence why the train was moving slowly, hence the music when the train was moving slowly. We're crossing over the Animus for the 5th and final time. The DNS appeared to have replaced the old wooden bridge that supported the tracks for decades over this crossing with a much sturdier structure with concrete. But we would have our stop in Durango, ate, and brought quite a bit of merch along the ride back. It was heavy though. But we'd still make it back to Durango with no problems. Although that trip would finish as planned, the next day things would be a little different. The next day came, we would have done another full round trip, but the road we took to get to Durango was treacherous, and we decided that it wasn't worth it for us to drive in the darkness along the way, especially because there weren't that many guardrails. I could have sworn state DOTs put a lot of their money into roads and road improvements. So I would ride one way from Durango to Silverton, and Mom would pick me up at Silverton, which after a special charter train left first, is what I would do. And I'm glad I did, because that would be a double header, and include K-28 473, which saved a lot of people in 1987. It was cool seeing the operation of the doubleheader. Honestly, it was like I could hear one engine saying, "I can't do it, I can't do it," and the other saying, "I will do it, I will do it," especially on the grades where you could hear them the most. Though if you want to see something like this on the High Line, you're out of luck, because the High Line's load limit does not permit 2 locomotives on it at the same time. But when the two got back together, it was another amazing show. Just seeing the action of 2 steam locomotives in tandem hauling a train is just something you don't really see with diesels as much as I like diesels. Because for diesels, it's not really the same compared to steam locomotives. And of course, I had to use a track from Century of Steam to describe the end of the line and the end of my first, but hopefully not last, trip to the Durango and Silverton. And here, I've been seeing video after video that Disney World and Disneyland 2 are incredibly pricey, but way pricier than in previous years. I remember hearing something that people were taking out loans just to go to Disney. So I felt like I was offering people a way less expensive alternative to Disney World. Why wait for hours for rides when you can wait minutes for a beautiful ride that lasts hours? One thing's for certain though, if you ever go to Colorado, definitely visit the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. Unlike Disneyland and Disney World, it will be worth your time, your experience, and most importantly, your money. Though, again, like the third Europe video, I had come out of some burnout from getting a lot of the other vlogs out when I wanted to get them out, including the Canada vlogs on the 1st of July, Canada Day. Not to mention, since they were the videos of the return trip, I didn't really have much else to say about them. But I did make a preview for the 6th video, which, I'll be honest, I made the title like it was so that I could get people worked up, because it was around a time when a lot of YouTubers were quitting, and people were wondering, who's the next to quit? Though, I did put in the description that I wasn't quitting. Sorry if I got you worked up. Though, one of the things I would mention was that one of the crossings along the line was a crossing where I'd record one of the earliest videos posted onto this channel. Though one of the new things mentioned was that we were going through a very long speed restriction downhill. Unfortunately for us, at this point, we entered an agonizingly long speed restriction, which would not lift until we reached the bottom of Big Ten curve. Damn Union Pacific. But I do understand that oftentimes things like these are for our own safety, and the good thing is that we made it down the hill safe and sound, which is more than what I can say for some other trains that were late in the past. And remember when I said that the Canada trip was the last trip where I would use a single battery? Well, this trip was the first trip where I would have 3 batteries on me, so if one battery died, I would have a fresh battery ready to go. And even though we were at the end of the trip, that is what happened around this area, where one of the batteries died, and I quickly put in a freshly charged battery in. Remember, kids, assuming there are any kids in my audience watching this, if you want to take a trip like this, always remember to have backups with you. Unfortunately, after I took this shot right here, the battery for my camera died. Unlike many of the previous trips that I did with my DSLR camera though, I was prepared with another battery. But yeah, as mentioned, I love the ride, and I'd absolutely do it again if I had the chance. And no matter how many personal issues I have with Mom, or how many issues Mom has with me, no matter how much Mom gets angry at me, or I get angry at her, no matter how many disagreements we both have, I'll always be happy that Mom went on the ride with me. If you're watching this, thank you for coming along, Mom. I'll always appreciate it. But anyways... This trip is probably the least I have to say about, mainly because this was only a small part of a bigger trip that my mom took me on. This trip was a bit of a family reunion, mainly for my mom's side, although some people on my mom's side of the family didn't come to Cancun. But I had been hearing about the Mayan train, especially its construction, and how it was partially finished in record time. Though you could argue that that's because there's less environmental regulation in Mexico, and all that I would mention in my record time controversy segment. Speaking of which, I had seen a lot of people put the Mario Kart countdown into things like record time segments, but I want to do the Lego City Undercover countdown for the time... But I want to do the Lego City Undercover countdown for time trials, mainly because it was a fun game, and I felt that it would be slightly different. Here is about every Mayan train controversy that I can list as of right now. The fact that only the positives were mentioned in the consultation, the fact that people considered the train as a political stunt by Obrador, ecological concerns, including that the train would damage the ecology beyond repair even though there were already highways that already damaged the ecology beyond repair, indigenous concerns by people who already lived in the areas where the train would be built, environmental concerns related to wildlife in the area, and social concerns about the people who lived along the Mayan train, like the cost of living, among other things. But seeing a line that was built this quickly was super cool. But a lot of the line was still under some construction and wasn't entirely finished, so you still saw quite a bit of equipment for, like, construction or whatever, still scattered along the line, including this work train with this Jeep. But a lot of the guards on board the train weren't exactly happy with me recording, mainly because I didn't have some kind of permission or something. But I would circumnavigate that by recording behind the guards' backs. Though one thing that I did not mention because I did not know it at the time I was making the video was that these trains are electro-diesel multiple units, or EDMUs, which are also known as bimode multiple units, or BMUs. Because the Mayan train will not be fully electrified, these trains can be used on both electrified and non-electrified segments of the Mayan train. So these trains can easily go from electrified territory to non-electrified territory, simple as that. Much like a lot of dual-mode locomotives that can run on both diesel and either overhead cable and or third-rail electricity. And I honestly believe, in my opinion, that these could be of great use throughout North America, especially on segments of lines that could be electrified and not electrified. So to Amtrak, Brightline, VIA, and all the others in North America, could you consider the use of electro-diesel multiple units, aka bimode multiple units, please? They could be of great help. Our trip aboard the Mayan train was to travel to Chichen Itza. Although I have been to Chichen Itza before, I was going with some cousins as well as my brother who hadn't. And it was still fun visiting Chichen Itza with my relatives. And it was especially fun seeing this dog too. On the trip back, there wasn't exactly that much to say, mainly because it was a return trip. But I did see some things like some houses, and especially this depot near one of the stations. Though one of the only things that was annoying was the fact that somebody began playing music along the ride, which I don't know if he or she had headphones on, but just because you don't have headphones, it doesn't mean blast it out on full volume for everyone to hear. A few minutes later, we departed the station. But overall, it was fun being on this train and being with my cousins as well as my brother along the ride. But there are still quite a lot of other trains in Mexico that I would like to see. But if I am able to go back in the future, that's what I would absolutely do. For now though, this video along the Mayan train exists. Now, let me talk about some other rail fanning. Despite the fact that trains come every couple of hours in Fort Collins, it was pretty fun watching trains in Fort Collins. Although a lot of the trains are mostly manifests, mainly the H Lao Den and the H Den Lao, occasionally you'd also see unit coal, unit grain, and even some intermodal trains too. And also I can safely say that I've been a lot more calm and relaxed when recording trains compared to last year, because
Holy shit! Holy
Fortunately, I was a lot more calm this year than last year. Of course, one of the things that didn't change was that the fact that a lot of the trains had quite a lot of GEVOs. In fact, I've caught quite a bit of GEVOs over this year, especially on the BNSF, enough to give BNSF 1458 and other EMD foamers cardiac arrests. But I don't really care if a train has a GEVO or not, because I'm just there to see what kind of things the train is carrying, for the most part. However, that wasn't to say that there were no trains without GEVOs, as the Great Western Railway of Colorado has quite a couple of trains that operate mainly without GEVOs, although GEVOs only operate if they're from the BNSF. And the Union Pacific operates locals through the area that are often the lightest, mainly because the line likely can't hold GEVOs. But I've caught plenty of non-GEVO leaders, even the rare paint scheme, and occasionally a foreign unit leading. And although some horns are known for being on one locomotive or another, there have been horns that have tripped me up, this AC 4400 CWM being one of them, as I seriously thought that there was a train with an ace leading.
Oh hey, Campac leader.
Though I can safely say that this shot of Dash 9 with the K5HL tripped me up the most.
No, it can't be.
My favorite trip up those was when this one GEVO had a Nathan P5 on it.
What?
But since 2024 is ending, I'd like to share my personal favorite shots in FOCO. So, here are my top 24 favorite shots of 2024.
3260 and 712.
No, it can't be.
What?
It had that horn? Oh my god. I forgot the name of the horn, but that was honestly the last horn that I'd expect on a Gevo. There's 9894. I've been wondering where you've been all along. Pack leader. for elsewhere... Although I haven't gotten that much outside of Fort Collins this year, what I got was still fun to catch. There have been plenty of foreign units like Ferromex, and I've been noticing that since CPKCS occurred, yeah, that rolls off better to me than just CPKC, there have been more Canadian Pacific units that I've seen. But I have also been along the Union Pacific line in Greeley, Colorado. Not to mention, because there are still many units on the BNSF that BNSF has yet to repaint from both the BN and the ATSF, I was able to see some, mainly these two BN units near the 31st Street Yard. Then there was Amtrak. I would head home several times from college throughout the year, and when I got to Union Station, I would almost always try to get the California Zephyr, unless there was something else going on when I came back. But what made it more fun was Amtrak's Phase 7 units, the Heritage units, and both the Phase 7 units and the Heritage units. I've seen Amtrak 164, 161, and 160, and honestly, 2 of my 161 shots were just times when I was lucky. The first time, Mom wanted to take me to an Easter vigil and offered to take me back on Monday, so I was able to get 161 on Sunday. I was excited when I saw it the first time.
Hello there, 161.
Then I saw it again because that time we were celebrating my dad's birthday near Union Station, and Dad offered to let me see if the Zephyr was at the station. It was, and so was 161. The final time was June 4th when I would see 161 on the westbound California Zephyr, although that time it was trailing and not leading. Sadly, that time would be the last time I'd see 161 in action, as she would later be destroyed in a fire. Thankfully, nobody was killed or injured, but it's a bit weird that 2 Phase 1 units have been wrecked. Maybe putting the scheme that was also put on a locomotive that's known for crashing constantly isn't a good idea. Then there was Amtrak 160, and my capture of Amtrak 160 is probably my favorite capture of the whole year. So much so that I've kinda made my capture of Amtrak 160 a part of my channel identity. 160 is my favorite heritage unit of all time, although that partially could be because of bias, since I'm a huge fan of Amtrak Phase 3. Especially Amtrak Phase 3 on the Genesis units. And if you're wondering about the F40s, I think Phase 2 looks better on the F40s. Overall, this catch is my favorite of all of 2024, but behind 160 was another unit that has since fascinated me. Yup, 174. Phase 7, whether it be on the Charger! Or other Amtrak equipment, has been a livery for Amtrak that's just captivated me, and I think I'm a sucker for it, to be honest. I already thought that Phase 7 looked amazing on the Chargers, which sue me, but I like the Chargers, mainly the ALC 42s. And when Amtrak 174 got painted into the scheme, I was amazed by it, and so was a lot of the Railfan community too on that note. And I just wanted to see it by that point. Fortunately, I would get the chance, as 174 would be assigned to the Winter Park Express. And seeing the Genesis units in Phase 7 is just amazing to me personally. The amount of colors on Phase 7, and the fact that Phase 7 also kind of resembles Amtrak's Travel Mark logo, is probably what makes Phase 7 look so amazing to me. Personally, I think Phase 7 is Amtrak's best livery since Phase 3 in my opinion. Hence why I consider my 160 and 174 capture my favorite capture of the whole year. And overall, I am looking forward to seeing more of Amtrak's Phase 7 locomotives, Charger, or other equipment. And remember that Rocky Mountaineer photo? Well, I was able to get the Rocky Mountaineer from what I deem my official time in June. Seeing the Rocky Mountaineer has just been amazing. And honestly, the livery of the train is so awesome. And while it's a shame that it doesn't have the double-decker cars, it's still nice even with all single levels. And I hope to one day ride the Rocky Mountaineer, assuming I can stop blowing my money on Steam sales But I have also been to Greeley, Colorado. I've been to Greeley twice this year, one in May, the other in October. And since both times I had came from Fort Collins, it was a nice change to see Union Pacific more frequently than BNSF. Especially since Union Pacific only operates a spur in Fort Collins. However, my favorite part of Railfanning in Greeley was the mechanical bells in nearby Evans. Their beautiful clangs are a dying breed across America, and I felt that now was the right time to see these mechanical bells before they're eventually replaced with e-bells.
But the knowledge of the mechanical bells in Evans would give Harrison an idea of where he would get his later shot in October of Union Pacific 4014.
Wait, since when did you get here?
I'm visiting. You can always say thanks.
Oh, thank you, bro.
You're welcome.
Later on in October, I would go again to Greeley and go to the steel bell crossings in Evans. Of course, I went to Greeley and Evans to see Union Pacific 4014. And the shot I have of UP 4014, especially with the steel bells, is probably my favorite capture of 4014 ever. And then seeing him depart from downtown Greeley was also a fun time, even if it was a bit crowded. Best day of ditching classes ever. Then there was the CRM, where I went for the last day of the Colorado Crossings event of 2024. Although it wasn't nearly as special to go then compared to my first time in 2022, I still had fun seeing the museum, especially riding behind RGS-20 and seeing the 491 pull its photo freight, with me getting a few shots where it looked like it was straight from the past, without actually being in the past. Fun fact, that video was the first video where I used the microphone I purchased for my dorm. Finally, there was Boston and the T. I went to Boston because we were going to Nantucket and the cheapest option was to lay over in Boston for 7 hours. So we took advantage of that time and took various T lines across Boston, and even saw an Amtrak Northeast Regional. And although it was a quick side trip, I was still able to make the most out of little time that we had, even though that time would extend constantly because of JetBlue. Finally, there's YouTube. This year has been quite a year for me on YouTube. I've begun making money off of YouTube, even if it's not much. And in addition to that, it's been fun posting and just engaging with people who comment on these posts that I would make, including things like posting about subscriber milestones based on Steam locomotive numbers, and occasionally wheel arrangements, something I've done since last year. And I would post about some anniversaries, like Big Boy's 5-year anniversary of its first run, where I accidentally posted NNW 2156 and not 4014. But at least the comments were funny. Yippee! Yippee! 2156. Yippee! Yippee! Pete, 2156, what are you doing here? Big boy, yes, 2156, big boy. Ah yes, Yippee 4014 and 844, what in the actual freak is ANW 2156 doing here? And this year, I was finally able to gain the courage to discontinue my train memes videos, since they're becoming more of a pain and a hindrance than something that I'd actually wanted to make. But in exchange, I've created a series where I would describe various steam locomotive wheel arrangements in 15 words or less. And also created 2 videos where I would yap about things I want to talk about. I'm not that big, and I don't have a well-known series like some others do, but I still want to see what I can do and find things to talk about in the future. Speaking of the future, what are my future plans? Well, first off, I will continue the 15 words or less wheel arrangement series with the 282 Mikado type, and maybe I will do something slightly unoriginal and make an Engines of the Rio Grande series covering locomotives that the Denver and Rio Grande Western owned throughout the years. In addition, I have another upcoming spring break trip, and we're still looking at where to go for that spring break now that Mom's finished college. So far, things may be pointing to we could be going to Japan, but until something is cemented, that's only a thought. And in addition, I realized that I've caught locomotives from all but one Class 1 railroad, CSX. I haven't caught any CSX locomotives, not CSX trains, or forward power of CSX locomotives. So I want to go somewhere along CSX territory next year and railfan CSX trains. I also realized that a lot of the CSX YN2 locomotives are eventually going to be repainted into YN3 and or rebuilt. And CSX also has heritage units, and I'd like to see some of those heritage units too if I can. So next year, if I have the ability to, I would absolutely travel to CSX territory and film CSX. And on that note, I would also like to go on the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad, a heritage railroad that I had wanted to go on since I was a kid, and ride on one of their trains, if not be able to ride behind the Western Maryland 1309, if the Western Maryland can get her up and running again by the time I'd like to make the trip. Overall, an East Coast trip to see some trains, and also visit a railroad museum or two, is something that I would like to do this upcoming year. And yes, I realize that this year has been not very good. And that is a bit of an understatement. I realize that this year has been bad, and that would be a major understatement. There were people exposed for doing bad things, and just as many, if not more people being falsely accused of doing bad things. Which, yes, pedophilia bad, people being attracted to minors, boo! That doesn't mean randomly accuse anyone and everyone of being one, especially without evidence. And it's been the hardest year to be a railfan this year, especially with things in the railfan community, which I really don't want to talk about. But now that it's Christmas time and the end of the year, it's time to let all that pain go. So, after a long and arguably really painful year for some, but also a good year to others in some ways, it's now time to reflect on this year. Hello everybody, I'm the real Harrison of Colorado. Yeah, ignore my looks, and yes, I do look like either somebody who'd teach classes at college or high school, your stereotype of a gamer or an anime fan, your stereotype of a nerd, etc. But that's not the point. The point is, over this year we've been through quite some hellish times, probably hard, and this year has sucked a lot more than most. and we have also had to endure a lot of hardships. I know because over the past week or so, I've been dealing with personal issues, especially with my grandma. In fact, this tree you see right here, we were only able to get the decorations up yesterday as of the making of this video, December 22nd. Normally around this time, my dad and I would play a song from a band of my dad's that he would play in the car, which I eventually grew accustomed to liking over time. And so, may I introduce to you all A Long December by Counting Crows.
Long December, and there's reason to believe maybe this year will be better than the last. I can't remember the last thing that you said as you were leaving. Oh, the days go by so fast, and it's one more day up in the canyon. And it's one more night in Hollywood. If you think that I could be forgiven, I wish you would. Na 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 na, yeah. The smell of hospitals in winter, and the feeling that it's all a lot of oysters but no pearls. All at once you look across a crowded room to see the way that light attaches to a girl. And it's one more day up in the canyons, and it's one more night in Hollywood. If you think you might come to California, I think you should. Na 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 na, yeah. Drove up to Hillside Manor sometime after 2 a.m. and talked a little while about the year. I guess the winter makes you laugh a little slower, makes you talk a little lower about the things you could not show her. And it's been a long December, and there's reason to believe maybe this year will be better than the last. I can't remember all the times I tried to tell myself to hold on to these moments as they pass. And it's one more day up in the canyon, and it's one more night in Hollywood. And it's been so long since I've seen the ocean, I guess I should.